This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
In other news now, Iraq's president has ruled out a Turkish invasion of his country and says the cross-border crisis over Kurdish fighters is over. Turkey has massed more than 100,000 troops on the border in the past month after a number of attacks by Kurdish fighters using bases in northern Iraq. But in spite of the troop buildup and a number of bombing raids, there's been little sign so far of a major incursion. From Istanbul, Mike Hanna has more.
More reinforcements arriving on Turkey's southern border, this following a day in which 4 soldiers were killed in clashes with members of the PKK. Now over 100,000 troops massed in the region, but still no mass military deployment into northern Iraq that the Turkish public has been expecting and indeed demanding. There has been an escalation of Turkish military activity in the past 24 hours, helicopter gunships and fighter aircraft striking at targets across the border. But those demanding the most extreme action against PKK bases still disappointed. And the feeling in the streets is that the government has been too slow in striking back. It's already too late. We should never have lost so many soldiers, says this man. The government is buying time, says another. They've been trying to fool people that they're doing something. I don't believe a cross-border operation will be effective anymore, contends a third. The terrorists have already gone. And yet the mass public demonstrations that took place earlier this month are no longer evident. On the face of it, the government has succeeded in calming the emotions that were running so high.
Now, I think many people come to the awareness of the fact that terrorism is not the fighting terrorism, is not only fighting with the terrorists in the mountain. It has some other areas to be fight.
A former general who commanded operations against the PKK, Edip Bashir, insists terrorism must be fought through political and economic means, not just by military force.
Only a cross-border operation would never solve the separatist terrorism problem of Turkey. Therefore, our governments, I think, are fully aware of this fact now. And they plan to take all measures in all areas together with the military measures.
And the public thirst for revenge tempered too by the dictate of the man that brought about the Republic. At exactly 5 minutes after 9 o'clock on the 10th of November every year, Turkey comes to a halt in memory of Kemal Atatürk. This was the time of the day he died, and all stop and observe a 1-minute silence. And all recollect too the words Atatürk uttered: peace at home, peace in the world. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Istanbul.
In Washington, the majority Democrats in Congress have increased their pressure on the U.S. administration, just as a recently released U.S. report indicated the Washington's 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan has cost $1.6 trillion. This report by Beidawa Afandi.
جدل بشأن الأرقام لا يحجب حرب المواقف بين الديمقراطيين والجمهوريين.
A debate about numbers does not hide the war of positions between Democrats and the Republicans. The 2 chambers of the U.S. Congress are preoccupied with the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and are divided about the priorities and policies that have been carried out for years. A joint congressional committee said in a written report that the cost of the war between 2002 and 2008 has been $1.6 trillion. If we understood it correctly, this number, which has so many zeros it can make one's mind spin and lose balance, includes the interest on the loan used to pay for this war, the loss of potential investments, the cost of long-term health care of wounded soldiers, as well as the disorder in the oil markets.
We simply cannot buy victory in Iraq.
ببساطة لا نستطيع أن نشتري النصر في العراق فقد كان هذا العام.
This year was the bloodiest year in the history of the war. More Americans were killed in 2007 than any other year of this long, long war.
سنوات هذه الحرب الطويلة جدا.
بالنسبة للديمقراطيين فإن تلك التكاليف.
To the Democrats, these long-term expenses do not make their country any more secure. Thus, they link the condition of allocation of $50 billion requested by Bush with his commitment to set a specific date for the beginning U.S. troop withdrawals from Iraq. The president says that the cost of such policy, politically and policy-wise, does not serve the interests of the country.
We don't need members of Congress.
We don't need members of Congress telling our military commanders what to do. We need our military commanders telling us what to do, so we can win the war against these extremists and radicals.
Far from the internal American debate, there are other fronts and issues that are rarely considered regarding the human cost of Iraqi civilians, their country's sovereignty, and its resources. Does the Iraqi government have a say in its own affairs? More directly, the question is, are the Americans alone taking responsibility for all these skyrocketing expenses, or is the war in one way or another, partially or entirely, being financed by occupied Iraq? This is being asked amidst total ignorance on the subject or a major effort to hide it.
Al Arabiya channel has obtained an exclusive videotape showing images of some parliamentary candidates buying votes in Jordan.
The incident is threatening the fairness of the upcoming legislative elections. Meanwhile, the Jordanian government is trying hard to preserve the integrity and transparency of these elections. Saad Silawi has the details from Amman.
Some parliamentary candidates in Jordan are engaging in illegal schemes, including the buying of votes. This news is a major blow to these elections, in which the Jordanian government is trying hard to preserve their integrity and fairness. Al Arabiya channel obtained a videotape showing images of some candidates buying votes in Jordan. Before receiving an amount of money that has been agreed upon, the prospective voters would swear on the Holy Quran.
Repeat after me. I swear to God, I received 10 Jordanian dinars. Thank you. Here is 30 dinars, 10 for each of you. On elections day, each will receive another 15 dinars. So 10 dinars for now and 15 dinars on election day.
It's bribery when someone receives money in exchange for his vote. In fact, he sold his subconscious for money. This is definitely bribery.
Yes, these things happen during elections. Some try to take money from more than one candidate. They try to sell their votes for money, and if not for money, then for food.
Political kickbacks, including the selling of votes, are illegal under Jordanian laws. The Jordanian government, which is trying hard to preserve the integrity and fairness of the elections, declared a war on these types of crimes. 2 weeks ago, the Jordanian police arrested 2 individuals who were hired by certain candidates to buy votes in exchange for financial gain.
The candidates don't have the privilege of gaining access to the ballot boxes, so they engage in this type of despicable and shameful scheme, which distorts the image of the Jordanian citizens. They are preying on the poor people and the unemployed. They also try to capitalize on the bad economic and living conditions in the country. I demand the Jordanian government denounce any candidate engaging in such illicit acts.
This bribery case is a case of inner subconsciousness and perception. However, it reflects the bad economic and living conditions of the Jordanian people and their dire need for money. While the Jordanian government is trying vigorously to combat this phenomenon, the responsibility in the first place lies on the Jordanian citizen. Saad Silawi, Al Arabiya, Amman.
Saad will stay with us from Jordan. Saad, in brief, how did you manage to obtain this videotape, and what is the election mood in Jordan?
Talib, the tape was sent to us by certain sources. As you noticed, we try to conceal the identities of the candidates and the voters in question. 10 voters who have sworn on the Holy Quran received money in exchange for their votes on election day. As far as the elections are concerned, the general mood in the Jordanian capital Amman can be described as calm. However, the elections mood in the south and the north is more active. The elections are expected to take place in about a week.
His Majesty the King is back home after holding a summit with German Chancellor Angela Merkel on political developments in the region and economic ties between Jordan and Germany. Also on the agenda was cooperation between the group of 11 low-middle-income countries and the group of 8 industrialized nations. The two leaders discussed regional and international efforts to achieve peace in the Middle East ahead of a U.S.-sponsored international peace meeting scheduled to be held in Annapolis later this year. Germany welcomed King Abdullah's efforts to push the G11 initiative forward, mainly efforts of member countries to achieve economic, political and social reforms. His Majesty and Merkel highlighted the importance of promoting relations among developed and developing countries, as well as the need to support reform in developing nations.
I'm very grateful for the Chancellor, as we did initiate again the dialogue between the G8 and G11, and we understand that there's still a lot of work to do between both sides, but I'm convinced that with Germany's support we will be able to move these two groups forward to achieve the vision of both sides.
We then also took the initiative to task our Sherpa to actually embark on a regular contact with the G11 countries, and Sherpa then also drew up a list of areas where we see eye to eye and where we have common interests. But we ought to be very careful of not overloading and overstretching the capacity of the G8. After all, the G8 only lasts, and the G8 presidency only lasts for a year.
The two leaders stressed cooperation in the area of development, as Germany's aid to Jordan currently stands at 1.2 billion euros. Germany said it backed Jordan's bid for an early repayment of its debt to the Paris Club of Official Creditors. Berlin, a member of the club, had signed a repayment deal with the kingdom. Germany also pledged to help Jordan in buying back its debts in line with the agreement.
Yesterday we signed a protection law, and hopefully we will then pursue the issue of maybe double taxation. There are a lot of opportunities between Germany and Jordan, and Excellency outlined some of these issues. We're very interested in renewable energy, alternative energy sources, especially wind power. Germany is one of the leaders in this issue, and we hope that in 2008 there will be an opportunity for German businesses to come in this area. We also have water conveyance projects and major infrastructure projects, including railroads, and we are now reaching out to German companies. So I think that we will have an opportunity in 2008 to open a new chapter of relations between German and Jordanian businesses.
Both the King and Merkel also discussed regional challenges and affirmed their support of the Annapolis meeting and a peace process that leads to an independent and viable Palestinian state. Earlier, His Majesty met chairman of the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the German Parliament, the Bundestag, during which he discussed bilateral cooperation and developments in the Middle East. His Majesty said he backed efforts to breathe new life into the peace process and expressed Jordan's appreciation of Germany's role in this regard.
French Foreign Minister Bernard Kouchner left Beirut last night and will return on November 21st, the scheduled date of the presidential elections. Meanwhile, sources said that French President Nicolas Sarkozy is set to come to Lebanon to attend the session of the swearing-in of the upcoming president on condition that the elections take place in accordance with the constitution and without any foreign interference. Now let's take a look at the series of meetings the French Foreign Minister held in Beirut yesterday. French Foreign Minister Bernard Kouchner ended his visit to Lebanon last night with a press conference at Rafik al-Hariri's International Airport. Kouchner stressed that the process leading to the presidential elections was on the right track. He further said he believed that the elections will take place on time. Kouchner noted that the contacts between the rival camps intensified. The French Foreign Minister, who is returning to Lebanon next week, said that discussions between the opposition and the majority were going smoothly. He meanwhile addressed the Lebanese by saying, quote, "The decision is in your hands and the international community supports you." France's foreign minister cited progress in efforts to reach consensus and warned the country would face a very difficult period without a deal. Before heading to the airport, Kouchner had met with the patriarch for a second time. Kouchner meanwhile met at the Pine residence with Christian figures. He discussed the presidential elections with head of the Phalange party, Amin Jmail. He then met with the head of Lebanese forces, Samir Jaja. Kouchner also met with former minister Simon Frangieh. The French foreign minister had also a stop in Arabiya, where he met with head of the Free Patriotic Movement, MP Michel Aoun. Kouchner refrained from making any statements following the meeting. Aoun, for his part, thanked France for its assistance in order for the Lebanese to reach consensus. Aoun told reporters that he and Kouchner exchanged the different viewpoints, stressing that he backs any president that carries a solution for the Lebanese crisis. Earlier in the day, the French delegation had met with House Speaker Nabih Berri, Premier Fouad Sanyura and MP Saad al-Hariri. Head of the Future Bloc in Parliament, MP Saad Hariri, stressed that the French initiative was for the best interest of the Lebanese and democracy in Lebanon. In interviews with France's Channel 5 TV station and Radio France International, MP Hariri said that there are voices being raised that do not want the elections to take place. Hariri, however, stressed that with the French efforts and the honest will of the March 14th alliance, a president will be elected. The head of the Future Bloc, meanwhile, said that there are certain voices that do not want to see a democratic Lebanon based on the Taif Accord. He stressed that the March 14th alliance believed in the Taif Accord and considered it a constitution to Lebanon. MP Hariri meanwhile said that the latest statements of Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah had a bad impact on Lebanon.
Joint forces from the army and the police have raided a terrorist nest in the Jazeera area near Salahaddin after intelligence information indicated that a terrorist nest there was using it as a refuge.
28 terrorists were arrested and a large amount of weapons and explosives were confiscated. A car bomb-making factory was also blown up.
Under
the supervision of the Salahaddin province, a joint force of the Salahaddin Emergency Police Force, a Quick Intervention Force, and the Iraqi Army 1st Brigades, the 4th Infantry Division, led by the province's Chief of Police, raided a terrorist nest in a village in the Jazeera area in the western province west of Samarra. They carried out the operation based on accurate and verified information.
We received information from the citizens that there were many groups of terrorists in the Jazeera Tikrit and Jazeera Samarra areas. After we gathered all the information, we called the implementation units from the emergency police and the Iraqi police.
These forces were able to purge the entire area of terrorists. The operation resulted in the arrest of 28 suspects and the confiscation of a large amount of weapons, ammunition, and equipment that the terrorists left behind as they tried to escape from the heroes of the Iraqi army and police. A factory to manufacture booby-trapped motorcycles was destroyed, as well as a large amount of heavy equipment and 7 different types of motorcycles.
We began in the northern area, west of Tikrit, south of Samarra. The area is about 120 kilometers in length. It was entirely searched. We destroyed a group of terrorist nests and the places where terrorists could possibly be present.
والمناطق المحتملة أن يتواجد فيها الإرهابيين.
The move towards an attack position by the Iraqi security forces is a good sign of the beginning of the inevitable end of the dark and backward forces, which have ill will towards Iraq and Iraqis. The security forces are closing in on these haters who do not reap anything in Iraq except failure and clear loss. For Iraqiya TV, Badir Shakir, Tikrit.
According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, more than 173,000 Somalis have fled Mogadishu during the past 2 weeks, as the level of violence and bombing attacks continue to escalate there.
The violence also paralyzed all trade activities in the port of Mogadishu. Meanwhile, many merchants were forced to use the port of Bosaso, some 1,500 kilometers away from the Somali capital. Abed Rahman Abdi has the details in his first episode of the series, From the Heart of Somalia.
One man's loss is another man's gain. This is the case of the Somali port of Bosaso, which has recently witnessed an unprecedented increase in trade activities as the level of violence continues to escalate in Mogadishu. This news comes as Somali merchants and traders started to use the port of Bosaso despite the long distance from the capital and the difficulty of travel there.
The operation here in the port is very good. The port is now being used by all Somali traders. In addition, the UN is using it to transport humanitarian supplies to central Somalia.
Meanwhile, trade activities in the city of Bosaso have increased. Many of the city's markets have witnessed a large turnout among shoppers and local vendors. Moreover, many people from southern Somalia and neighboring countries started to come to Bosaso looking for jobs and daily labors. Amidst this economic boost, the city of Bosaso is facing new challenges as some local traders started to engage in illegal activities such as human trafficking and money counterfeiting, especially that of the 1,000 shilling bill. In addition, the city is witnessing an increase in pirate activities on the high seas. It seems that the state government is not doing enough to put an end to these problems, especially those related to trafficking and piracy.
The state of Puntland is authorized by the federal government to issue the Somali currency in a legitimate way. However, some traders have engaged in secret and illegal activities to print counterfeit money and launder it in the state of Puntland and southern Somalia.
Meanwhile, the local authorities in Bosaso were unable to combat the owners of those print shops used to counterfeit and launder money. This news comes amidst allegations that some government officials might be involved in the money laundering business. Abed Rahman Abdi, Al Arabiya.
The Mauritanian Minister of Interior, Yal Zakarai, vowed to pursue and try those responsible for the recent violence in Mauritania. He said that these acts of violence have reached areas in eastern Mauritania, killing 1 person and wounding 13 others.
عدوى أعمال العنف والشغب التي انطلقت شرارتها في الشرق الموريتاني.
The violence and disorder broke out in the eastern part of Mauritania and spread towards the capital of Nouakchott, but the situation was kept under control. Students went out to the streets in the middle of the city and set car tires on fire, but they were curbed by the police. In lower-class neighborhoods, which are plagued by unemployment and poverty, a limited number of larceny cases have been reported. This made the owners of commercial shops close their doors, especially in the disruptive areas.
Demonstrations and strikes have negatively affected civilians. They weren't worth it. The recent events in the country are unfortunate and unacceptable. They need to be contained so they do not spread further, and the government needs to take them seriously.
The unsettling situation was exacerbated with the unrealistic rise in gas prices and essential commodities.
The government gives elaborate justifications. That is the only thing they offer. But they have to come up with real solutions, quickly.
The prices are ridiculous. Corruption, alcoholism, and gambling are spreading. We wait for things to improve, but they don't.
Demonstrations continued and spread in the eastern areas after one of the protesters was killed in the town of Kouchner.
The eastern areas are traditionally known for their loyalty to the ruling authority. They actually helped to bring the current president into power. But it seems that the difficult living conditions there are no longer bearable. This, however, does not justify the disruption, which has killed one person and subjected civilian protesters to gunshots.
Prices have gone up and the cost of living has doubled. So Mauritanians went out to the streets, which is their natural right according to the Constitution. However, this right has the responsibility to protect the property and the lives of the citizens, especially when impermissible chaos enters the scene. Mohammed Abdullah Marnin, Al-Alam, Nouakchott.
The Iranian parliament gives vote of confidence to President Ahmadinejad's nominees for oil as well as industries and mines ministries. Out of 246 votes cast, 217 MPs voted in favor of Ghulam Hossein Nozari for the post of oil minister, 20 against and 9 abstained. Meanwhile, Ali Akbar Merabian took office as the Minister of Industries and Mines, securing 174 votes in favor, 49 against, and 18 abstentions. Following the confidence vote session of the legislature, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Parliament Speaker Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel attended a press conference where they expounded on their viewpoints concerning domestic and international questions. The president announced that Iran is conducting uranium enrichment on industrial scale and will press on with the work on schedule under the supervision of the UN Atomic Agency. President Ahmadinejad reassured that Iran will abide by its commitments under the regulations of the International Atomic Energy Agency. As for the speculations on yet another UN resolution against Iran, the president said the previous sanctions have proven a total failure and that the initiators of the documents are reportedly investigating the possible effects of those sanctions on Iranian life. Parliament Speaker Haddad Adel, meanwhile, said that arrangements have been made for the Second General Assembly of the Asian Parliaments in Tehran next week and expressed hope the conference would mark a giant stride for convergence of Asian nations.
One nation, many voices. The stories of Muslims in America. At work, at play, having fun. What is life like for the millions of people in this country who practice Islam?
And then finally I looked in my heart, and there he was. Even today, Muslims still recite
kind of in limbo.
Now's your chance to share stories of Muslims in America in our One Nation, Many Voices online film contest. We're awarding $50,000 in cash prizes divided among 6 categories: comedy, drama, documentary, animation or music, a special category for filmmakers 18 and under, plus films under 60 seconds long. You don't have to be a Muslim to enter or to vote for your favorite films online. You just have to live in the United States. The new deadline for entries is December 31st, 2007, so hurry. Check out details at linktv.org/OneNation. One Nation, Many Voices. Muslims in America. Stories, not stereotypes.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.